Hey everyone, you're watching ToraNin. Today I'm going to be talking about the theory of Minato being the secret love child of Dan and Tsunade and why I believe this theory, though a strong one, is inaccurate. Before I go into that, I think it's important to mention that I first learned of this theory by watching anime Balls Deep. I believe he put up a video on this theory 2 years ago. After watching that video, I have seen several mentions of this theory with essentially the same arguments. So while Anime Balls Deep may not have been the originator of the theory or its only proponent, I will be basing a lot of my counter arguments on the explanations he puts forward in his video. So based on the theory, Minato was probably conceived during the Second Great Ninja War when Dan and Tsunade were lovers and born after Dan was killed in that war. There are five major arguments put forward to support the theory. The first one is the blonde hair Minato, Naruto, and Tsunade share as a genetic contribution from the theorized Namikaze clan, or perhaps more accurately, Namikaze family. It is theorized that Hashirama never had a son with Mito Uzumaki, instead siring a daughter who married some man from this family, hence Tsunade's dirty blonde hair, the Senju brown plus the Namikaze bright blonde, and subsequently Minato's and Naruto's bright blonde hair color. The second argument has to do with Minato's basic chakra nature affinities being an overlap of Tsunade's and Dan's. Based on the databook, Minato inherits his fire affinity from both potential parents, his wind affinity from Dan, and his lightning affinity from Tsunade. It isn't a perfect intersection of their chakra natures though. He doesn't get earth release, which they both have, or water release, which Tsunade exclusively has. But the argument is that he is an overlap of both characters, and since chakra natures are hereditary, he had to have inherited his from both of them. The third argument is based on Naruto being practically the only character to get away with referencing Tsunade's age, and Naruto does this constantly by calling her Granny Tsunade. The argument is basically Tsunade not reacting, since based on this theory, that would technically be true. She is his granny. Still on Naruto, the fourth argument references Naruto's slight resemblance to Nawaki, who is Tsunade's younger brother. Their spiky hair, shape of the face, broad smile, all that stuff. The final argument references the last conversation Tsunade had with Jiraiya, where they talk about Naruto's parents and focus on Minato, praising his genius, his quick rise to Hokage, and while noting that no one like him has been born in a while, Jiraiya states that he never had kids, so he doesn't know what it was like, but if Minato had been his kid, he'd brag about him all the time. So let's analyze these one after the other, starting with the blonde hair argument. Obviously, hair color is hereditary and can be passed on from parent to child. Minato did so with Naruto. The Uchiha mostly have the same jet black, slightly spiky hair type, and one of the distinct features of the Uzumaki clan is their red hair. However, while this could be a strong indication, the truth is, it could also be merely coincidence. Naruto is an Uzumaki by virtue of his mother, but doesn't have red hair. Conversely, Gaara, who has red hair, is not an Uzumaki at all. At best, this argument could be an indication and can't be taken by itself to be proof of parentage. To be fair to Anime Balls Deep, he doesn't do that. So let's go on to the next argument. The overlap of basic chakra natures and having the same blood type as Dan is a strong one, to be honest. I believe it is Dan, and I forgot to mention the blood type relationship earlier. However, there are only so many blood types in existence and only five basic nature types. The truth is, this could honestly also be coincidental. Since there are only five basic nature types, is it a stretch to believe that two other random individuals who aren't Dan and Tsunade might have chakra nature releases that when combined gives Minato the exact same overlap? It is not. His lightning release could come from A's father, his wind and fire release from someone in the Sarutobi clan. I'm just making the point that because these are the basic nature types and everyone has at least one of the five, it really could be any other two parents with the individual types to make the combination that is Minato. If Minato had a derived nature type that was a combination of two or more types, such as would release, for example, then it becomes an even stronger argument. So let's take would release, for example. If Minato had that, then for sure we are looking at a relationship with Hashirama. It becomes an absolutely strong argument, as it was in the case of Captain Yamato, who we found out was a clone. Moving on to Naruto getting away with calling Tsunade Granny, I think this is a bit of a stretch. Naruto is known to give nicknames to just about everyone he has grown fond of. Erosenin for Jiraiya, Bushi Bros for Rock Lee, you name it. Tsunade wasn't going to be an exception, and Naruto, remember, has this endearing spirit that allows him get away with a lot of things others won't. I think Tsunade just realized she wasn't going to stop him and decided to let it be. Considering how fond of him she became, particularly due to him reminding her of Nawaki, I can see why. This brings me to the resemblance to Nawaki. Now, I have to admit that this one might be a strong one, simply because this is a play that has been used in so many animes before. The striking resemblance that seems to hit everybody in that anime world. In Bleach, it was Ichigo's resemblance to Kai and Shiba. In Naruto, it is Naruto's resemblance to Nawaki. However, there could be another explanation since we know Tsunade is part Uzumaki as well. If that is the case, then most likely Nawaki is too. Since Naruto is part Uzumaki too, it could be that they both have a similar appearance from some common Uzumaki ancestor. A sibling of Mito Uzumaki perhaps? But this one is still a strong argument. By far, the strongest argument for me though is the discussion Tsunade and Jiraiya had about Minato. However you look at it, it does appear that Jiraiya was implying that Minato was Tsunade's child, who she hardly bragged about, and he would brag about if he were Minato's father. Also, when he says, in quote, I don't know what it was like, it appears he is referencing the pain of losing a child. I'm not sure what else he could be talking about there. Look at it any way you want. This is the hardest argument to explain away. Put these arguments together, both the strong and weak ones, and you have a pretty solid theory. So why then, ToraNin, do you say this theory is inaccurate? You sound like you're in support of it. I'll tell you. The main counter argument I have to this entire theory is this: timeline and age. The math just doesn't add up. We're gonna do some simple arithmetic here. At the start of the Naruto series, Tsunade is officially said to be 50 years old, and Naruto is said to be 11 years at the time. We also know Naruto was born on the same day Minato died. Based on Naruto's age, that was 11 years prior to the start of the series, which means Tsunade would have been 39 years old when Naruto was born. We also know Minato was 24 years old when he died, which means Tsunade is only 15 years older than Minato. To be Minato's mother, she would have had to give birth to Minato when she was 15. Now, there are a whole lot of things wrong with this picture. First, there's the lack of appropriateness here. Yes, I understand that Naruto is heavily influenced by ancient Japanese culture and lifestyle, and most likely during that time in historical Japan, a 15-year-old bride would not have been out of place. However, Naruto is influenced by ancient Japanese culture. It isn't designed to be an accurate representation of that culture or time period. If you take the Naruto verse by itself, give me one other instance of teenage pregnancy that you've seen. The answer is none. More times than not, Any romantic relationships in Naruto begin as innocent friendships, crushes, and attractions. Sakura and Sasuke, Naruto and Hinata, Minato and Kushina, Shikamaru and Temari, the list goes on. They only imply intimacy or romance once they are adults, and that is usually done by showing that they've had kids together, and barring divine conception, there's only one surefire way to make these babies. What I'm saying here is it is highly unlikely that an 18-year-old Dan Kato impregnated a 15-year-old Tsunade. Secondly, there's the mismatch of timelines. According to the original theory, Minato was most likely conceived during the Second Great Shinobi War, which is when we are told Dan and Tsunade became lovers. But based on his age, we know for a fact that he was born a few years prior to that war, 4 years prior to be exact. If we ignore the inappropriateness argument and insist that Tsunade is the mother, then Dan can't be the father since they weren't lovers then. That still tanks this theory. If we ignore the timeline of Minato's age, we'd essentially be arguing with the creator of the story on his story, which just doesn't make any sense. The timeline counter argument really does neutralize this theory. The only way this theory survives that is if we assume Masashi Kishimoto, over the course of the story, decided to secretly weave this in as some Easter egg, but forgot to account for the timeline issue, and that will remain an assumption until he comes out and clarifies it. There is one more thing I'd like to discuss about this theory, and that is a major reason I saw that it was brought up by other people and not Anime Balls Deep. The reason a lot of people discuss this has to do with Naruto being the transmigrant of Asura and him having to be a Senju, Asura's descendants, to be that, since both known transmigrants of Indra have been Uchiha, who are Indra's descendants. What is not being taken into consideration is the canon knowledge that Asura had two major descendants, the Senju and the Uzumaki. Once you know this, it quickly becomes obvious that for Naruto to be Asura's transmigrant or reincarnation, he can either be a Senju, what we theorize that he is, or an Uzumaki, what we know he is by virtue of his mother, Kushina Uzumaki. I think because we live in such a patriarchal world, we focused on Naruto's potential paternal lineage without considering that his maternal lineage was an equally viable route for Asura's transmigration. So there it is. This is why I do not believe Minato is the secret love child of Tsunade and Dan. I do, however, believe that Minato's full backstory is a great story that Masashi Kishimoto should consider telling one day. What are your thoughts on my analysis of the theory? Share them in the comments as I am always open to discussions. If you liked this video, smash that thumbs up button, share it with your friends, and if you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button. I am trying to grow this into an awesome anime, gaming, and entertainment channel, and your support is greatly appreciated. Finally, if there are any other topics you want me to cover on this anime or another anime of interest, let me know and I'll be sure to dive into it. Until next time, Jana.